Welcome to the Fretboard Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde. As always, that is John Rauhaus playing in the background. Our friend Ethan Sherman took over this podcast for 4 episodes not that long ago with Adam Levy for the String Theories takeover. He's been mentioned a lot on this show. He came to our last Fretboard Summit and blew a bunch of minds. And today he is on the podcast talking about his new record called Passages. If anybody out there is into bluegrass-inspired contemporary music, I'm thinking Punch Brothers and the Ilk, you're going to love this record. And I love talking to Ethan about it. I hope you enjoy it. And now the $1 million question. A bunch of folks have been asking me what's going on with Fretboard Summit news and what's going on with the Fretboard Journal's 54th issue. I'm happy to announce our 54th issue is getting printed right now. We're using a new facility. It's going to get printed even faster than normal and shipped, most importantly, faster than ever before. I'm super excited. If you want to join us, now is the time. Fretboardjournal.com. Click on the subscribe tab. We will not charge you any extra, and we'll start you off with the 54th issue. If you need to renew, now is a great time to do that. Or if you need to change your address, shoot me a note. Podcast@fretboardjournal.com. I will change your address myself. Fretboard Summit updates. I am looking at, 60 index cards of different sessions that are been proposed or that are happening at the 2024 Fretboard Summit this August in Chicago. It's going to be incredible. We've got a lot of fan favorites coming back, like our friend TJ Thompson and Mark Stutman, and Greg Hutton is coming back to talk about Martin history. We've got some new faces like Chris Martin IV showing up this year. Josh Scott is coming back to helm the Fretboard Summit Science Fair. And as you've probably heard on this podcast, a whole bunch of great artists are hoping to come or hoping to make it work in their schedule. We just added John Leventhal to the schedule. So we've got Blake Mills, John Leventhal, Joe Henry, Colin Hay, Valerie June. We've got Ryan Richter, who was just on this podcast, coming, and a whole bunch of others. We are not done announcing all the workshops or all of the performers or really anything. I can tell you that the list of luthiers exhibiting and vendors exhibiting is thoroughly mind-boggling. And I hope you can come to our guitar party. It's August 23rd to 25th, 2024 at Chicago's Old Town School. And the way to register is to go to fretboardsummit.org. And you can read up all about it, get a hotel wherever the heck you want, and you will have one of the greatest weekends of your life. I can tell you personally that 2024 has not been my favorite year. And throughout good times and bad, I just keep thinking about the finish line of the Fretboard Summit and how much fun it's going to be to see all of my friends and all of our readers and all these brands that we celebrate and all of these amazing luthiers. So if you are anything like me and just need something to look forward to and something to get excited about, go to fretboardsummit.org, sign up. I would love to see you. Reach out to me, podcast@fretboardjournal.com if you want, and we can talk shop. I can give you some tips. It'd be great to see a whole bunch of you. So our podcast, as always, is brought to you by a handful of brands that love what we do, love what I do. Seattle's own Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar is sponsoring the podcast. One of the coolest guitar shops around. They're in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. If you're nowhere near Seattle, please follow them on Instagram. Follow them on YouTube now. See what all the fuss is about, mmguitarbar.com. An incredible array of vintage instruments, eclectic instruments from the Japanese-only market, cool synths, you name it. They've also got an incredible repair and restoration facility that's like right in-house. It's as big as the store. It's crazy. Peghead Nation is sponsoring the podcast once again. You can use the discount code FRETBOARD to get your first month free. So many Fretboard Journal subjects and podcast guests teach over on Peghead Nation. It's really the coolest spot around if you want to be better at bluegrass music, Americana music, folk, jazz, you name it. They've got you covered. We're also brought to you by Collings Guitars, our friends in Austin, Texas. They're now offering Pau Ferro as a tonewood option in very limited quantities. If you are ordering a custom Collings flat top guitar, I'll include a link to their Instagram page for that. It reminds everybody of the old straight grain vintage Brazilian rosewood that is kind of impossible to get these days. Thanks, Collings, as always, for sponsoring the podcast. Our friends at Stringjoy Strings are sponsoring the podcast once again. Use the discount code Fretboard and you can get 10% off of your first order at stringjoy.com. They've got acoustic guitar strings, electric guitar strings, and mandolin strings now. A truly cool company running out of Nashville. Check them out if you haven't yet. And then last but not least, our friends at iZotope have released RX11. Follow the link in the show notes to learn all about it. Tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. I know I've been a little quiet on social media because life took over, but go to fretboardjournal.com. You'll see a whole bunch of new content, almost daily content, just for guitar fanatics such as yourself. We've also got a YouTube channel and a Patreon if anybody wants to dig a little deeper and help support us. Go follow those links. And now, here is my conversation with my old housemate at the 2023 Fretboard Summit, Ethan Sherman. We're talking about Passages, his new album. Ethan, welcome back to the Fretboard Journal Podcast.
Thank you, Jason. I'm really amazed that I haven't worn out my welcome.
Are you kidding me? You were great. You and Adam. What were the episodes? 447 to 451? I don't even remember. You probably do. But for 4 episodes, for folks who haven't heard, you and Adam at the beginning of 2024 took over the podcast, and it was so much fun to hear you guys do that.
It was so fun for me too. I had a blast.
Lots of special guests. You had lots of New Year's resolutions were discussed. It was super fun. And now you have a new record.
Yeah, I guess it's my year.
Before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the making of this, because I'm looking back at, you and I go back a ways. You were at our Fretboard Summit. You were touring literally the world with Michael Bublé. Did this record take place in 2023? Did you record it?
Yeah, it was recorded, I think, the second week of January 2023.
Okay. And this had been brewing for a while?
Yeah. I made a record in 2020. Well, I made it over pandemic lockdown times, and it came out in 2022 called Indoor Vistas. And that was sort of a COVID record, tracked remotely, yada, yada, yada. And this was, in my mind, this was sort of like a kind of a sequel to that, but done, live in the room, and kind of designed to bring that element of it to the fore as much as possible.
Yeah. You're such a multi-talented guy. You were at our Fretboard Summit in more of a rock blues setting, playing alongside Adam Levy and Josh Scott and Ryan Richter and a bunch of heavy hitters. You also have this bluegrass side to you. What came first? And then there's the jazz side. Michael Bublé certainly accentuated that part. What was the entry point for guitar for you?
I started playing, my first guitar lessons were when I was 5 years old. And when I was 4, I was asking my parents for guitar, and they said they had heard somehow that the best first instrument for a kid to learn is piano, because it's a little more visual, it's easier to see. And that if you can play piano, you can play any instrument. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they were told. So they put me in piano lessons when I was 4, and they said, if you still want guitar lessons at 5, we'll get you a guitar. So I did it. I did as I was told.
Mm-hmm. Good kid.
And stuck it out in piano lessons for a year. And then started doing guitar when I was 5. But, I don't really know. I was always captivated by music in general as a little kid. There was a Peter, Paul, and Mary PBS special that I would watch as a toddler, incessantly on repeat. So I don't think it even mattered, what it was. There was that. There was the Paul Simon live from the Graceland tour concert that my parents had taped off the TV, that I was also totally obsessed with as a very small person. So yeah, the music and the guitar thing has always kind of been there. I don't even really know if I could explain it. at this point. And then all the, various, things that I got into at one time or another, I think are just sort of a consequence of um, just growing up and, you meet somebody at school who shows you something. I realized, oh, I want to like make this my life, my career. What do I have to do that? Then you find out, oh, you still want to go to college? Well, okay, there's classical guitar. I never really did that. There's jazz. Okay, I'm already playing electric guitar. That seems like, oh, maybe I could do that. And then you go down that rabbit hole. And then the acoustic music thing really started when I was in college, and was just burned out on jazz and was looking for something more, I don't know, approachable or something. I don't know if that's the right word, but I really fell in love with that music. I was going to college in LA at USC, and started going to shows at Largo, where Sean and Sarah Watkins play. And then combined with a couple other things, I was like, all right, this is the thing. This is what I gotta dive into. And at that point, I was, in music school and kind of already on this, like, I don't know, pre-professional track or something. And I was already playing, very seriously. So it wasn't just like, I'll just fool around with this. I was like, I really want to commit to going as hard as I possibly can on learning this music. And I want to get to playing with the people who are really doing it as quick as I can. Yeah, that's like the real cliff notes, I guess. And then, everything else that's happened has just sort of been a consequence of just sticking around and trying to be a part of, different communities and make a living, and also, find ways to be creative and balance, I guess, is kind of the big thing. Within the umbrella of music and guitar, I've never really been able to settle and be like, all right, this is my thing. This is what I'm doing, and go all in. I've always sort of been a little bit all over the place. Better for.
I mean, I think it's for better. I mean, you're holding your own here on passages with some pretty heavy hitters in the world of bluegrass, and it's incredible. And your songwriting is incredible too. But you've also got this other side, and I just, going back to the Largo show, and was acoustic music just, especially in that setting, Largo is such an intimate, cool club with, special guests and everything showing up at any moment. Did it just seem like more fun than sort of the USC I'm going to become a jazz guitarist track?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, the community aspect of the acoustic music thing, even though I didn't know any of those people at that time. I do now, but I didn't then. Like, they all just seemed so cool, and I was like, and there are so many parallels with all the other music I was playing. Modern acoustic music and jazz have so much in common in terms of, improvisation and the way people kind of interact with each other. And, it's not like there are bands and there are solo artists. It's this big, collaborative pool. There are all these parallels, and it almost felt like, oh, this is kind of like this other thing, but the people are nicer and there are less chords.
Yeah. And it's okay if there are, I guess in a bluegrass setting, it's okay if there are like multiple people playing the same instrument, whereas more than one jazz guitarist gets a little cumbersome.
Yeah, two is kind of the limit. At those Largo shows, it would be like Sean and Sarah and Noam and Gabe and, Julian and Critter were in town, and they would come up and play. And I, knew Julian at that point. And he was kind of this big kind of mentor figure for me growing up. And the fact that, he was playing with these people and, they very much accepted him as one of their own. Um, that was like, oh, like there may be a way into this.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also very encouraging of me studying that music at that time and going in deep. And he introduced me to a lot of people in that scene as well.
So Passages, what was the original idea behind it, and what did you know that this was going to be the lineup all along?
No, I didn't. Sort of, it was kind of a combination of things. Thomas Cassell and Avery Merritt, who played mandolin and fiddle on it, they were on the COVID record. And I knew I wanted to, like, those guys are like closer to my age, and I kind of feel like we're very much peers in this kind of scene. So I knew I wanted to, just do something with them in real time. And I also knew I wanted it to be like the classic, like, 6-piece bluegrass wall of sound thing. I live in LA and there aren't a lot of like amazing like banjo and dobro players. So I knew bench for this stuff is in Nashville, and my friends who I want to play with are in Nashville. So I better make the record in Nashville. So those were kind of the guiding things. And then originally it was going to be just 2 days of recording, one with those guys, Ethan Jodziewicz on bass, and just a quartet. And then a second day was going to be with Wes and another dobro player. And that was originally supposed to happen in June of 2022. And then I got COVID and it didn't happen. So and that was sort of very much like a slapdash kind of put together thing. I think the tunes were kind of half baked. I didn't really have everything quite together yet. I don't think I was quite ready to do it. So I think it was a blessing in disguise that it didn't happen. And then like later that month, the opportunity came up to start playing with Michael Bublé. And I was like, I would be crazy not to do this. And that kind of filled up the rest of my year. So while I was on the road, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I still make this happen? There are a bunch of people's schedules to juggle, but also I have this time, and to be honest, like, was able to raise up the budget a little bit to see, like, it suddenly became this like, oh, I have an opportunity to make this like a little bit more of like my dream project. So then I really leaned into that. I realized, oh, I need somebody to produce this. I've worked with producers, plenty in recording contexts as like a studio musician, but never on any of my own creative projects. And one thing I was thinking about as I was assembling this music was that I didn't want it to just be like a ripping guitar record. I really wanted it to feel like a band thing. Even if my name was on it and I was writing the tunes and getting everybody together, I want to just feel like I'm in the mix with these guys. So I realized, just listening to a lot of instrumental acoustic records that I love, that so many of my favorite records that have that feeling, they're not guitar player records. They're all banjo player records. Thinking about the Bela stuff is a big touchstone, of course, like Drive and the Bluegrass Sessions. Tony Trishka records, Noam Pikelny records, Wes Corbett's Cascade, record. All these things, yes, like the banjo player is the band leader, but it's very much this band ensemble sound, and everything is arranged for everybody to, bring their full selves to it. And everybody's playing melodies, and there are ensemble sections, and it's just this big kind of loop of strings,
Why do you think banjo records are maybe a little more democratic than, is it just because people are self-aware enough to know, like, well, we can't have banjo drive this whole song, so they take breaks?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that's a ripe opportunity for some pretty rude banjo jokes.
No, I know. But I'm trying to avoid those.
I don't know.
That is interesting, though, because it is, as you pointed out, like a slightly different aesthetic.
Yeah. I think, I'm not trying to talk smack on like flat picking guitar records, because I love them too. I just don't really feel like those are where my strengths are as a musician. And I didn't really feel like I could make the best record that I was capable of if it was just all about flat pick guitar solos. I think where I'm the most comfortable is kind of blending into a bigger picture and creating a context and a frame for something. But that led to Wes. I had originally hired him just to play banjo for that one day, and I didn't know him. Ethan Jodziewicz gave me his number, and I just cold reached out and said, "Hey, like, are you around on this day for this session?" And he was. And then that session didn't happen, and I thought, all right, well, like, I know Wes produced his records. I know he co-produced his own record. I wonder if he would be into this. So I sent him some more music and kind of talked it over with him, and luckily he was, totally on board, and that kind of expanded it into this into what it is, really. It would not be what it is without him. He's absolutely amazing.
I mean, is there a sense, I think most people, most casual musicians listening to this will not view you this way, but you are kind of an outsider to the world of Nashville acoustic music, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, most people will be like, this guy's played with Julian Lage and he's like been to the Fretboard Summit and done all this stuff. But I mean, that is its own universe. So was it a little intimidating, kind of like trying to do this?
Yes and no. It helped that like most of the people who were playing with me were like my friends, and I already knew them. Like, I wouldn't say that I like work consistently in that world, but I've always, had, deep friendships and musical relationships with people in that scene, even if, it's not, my day-to-day gigging life. So I very much felt like I was, among friends, and but also like, yeah, recording is still very much like, oh my God, I got to get this down. You have limited time and you want to play your best. And I definitely, pushed myself with the writing of the tunes and the arranging to kind of do things that maybe I hadn't done before on the guitar, or at least recorded. Nobody's asking me to make my own records. So when I do them, I really want to treat them as a growth opportunity.
Sure. Why don't you walk us through the lineup of this album? Because it is a pretty impressive lineup.
Yeah. Should I just go down to the list? Do you want me to talk about it?
Go down the list and riff on it. Tell me about.
Okay. Avery Merritt plays fiddle. People, maybe they don't know his name, but if they've seen Sierra Hull in the last couple years, he plays with that band. Thomas Cassell plays mandolin. He's incredible. He plays with a lot of different folks. He had a band for a number of years called Circus Number 9. I met Thomas and Avery at this camp in Savannah, Georgia, called the Acoustic Music Seminar that Mike Marshall ran for many years, for like um, just like young-ish kind of hotshot acoustic musicians to sort of just like get together and work on music for a week under the auspices of the Savannah Music Festival. So I met those guys there. Ethan Jodziewicz plays bass. He is another. He's a little older than me, but I very much, feel like we're kind of in the same generation of folks. He has been playing with Efo Donovan a lot. Played with Sierra Hull, Milk Carton Kids. Just an incredible upright bass player who kind of comes out of the modern acoustic background, and also can do stuff with a bow that nobody can. I think he studied with Edgar Meyer and kind of comes out of that school of things. Wes Corbett playing banjo. People probably know him from the Sam Bush Band and his brilliant solo records, and Joy Kills Sorrow and Simon Chrisman, the records they made together. He's super prolific. And then Rob Ickes on Dobro.
Yeah.
Which, what can you say? He's the man.
You mentioned how these songs kind of evolved when you had to take that break, first because of COVID, then because you were on the road with Michael Bublé. How much material did these performers have going into these sessions? Like, you obviously had your guitar parts presumably mostly figured out, but like, what did you actually give them?
Yeah, I gave them demo recordings of basically me just playing the melodies to a metronome and a rhythm guitar track.
Yeah.
And then charts with like, I guess two kinds of charts, like an arrangement chart and like a chart with the chords and the melodies. And, the arrangement would say, all right, it would just basically say who's playing what when, guitar melody, banjo solo, mandolin solo on the B section, break for a bass solo over the A, just like a form chart. So they had all that. So we had 2 days of rehearsals and we could get to playing stuff fairly quickly that way. And we had a baseline to work from. And then based on what worked and what didn't work, we would change stuff around as we heard it. But yeah, there was and they got all that stuff like a month before the session. So there was plenty of time for them to get it together. And then Wes and I would sort of, I would zoom in. I would get on Zoom with him from, like Brazil or whatever. And we'd sort of telegraph these arrangements, and I would, play a tune for him. And he would be like, okay, yeah, like work on your rhythm playing in this part, because that might feel a little squirrely with everybody. Or like, why don't you move this note like one beat that way, and this melody will speak more. Just, these small little adjustments to the tunes and to the arrangements that just hopefully made them more compelling.
I mean, you obviously had a vision. Did this focus on charts kind of come a little bit from the Michael Bublé gigs in terms of like learning just how to arrange, or is this sort of something that's natural for you?
I learned how to do it in school for sure. Yeah. Playing in different ensembles, and you're never really going to see a string band like with charts on stage, but they're pretty common in the recording world. Because everybody's sitting down, they're in their little pod, and if it's new and complex music that you haven't really that you're still kind of wrapping your head around, having that visual reference can be helpful. But yeah, I didn't even think about that connection, because but no, I would say it's kind of more coming out of just like, well, that's what you do when you make a record, just so that everybody can be prepared. Because like, I wasn't gonna to like really memorize things and kind of be on the ball and be able to change stuff on the fly. that's just a lot to hold in your head while you're trying to figure out, how you're going to play this tune. And I felt it was my responsibility to be off book, just so that I could be as present as I could. But if anybody else was going to do that, it was extra credit for sure.
Where did you record it?
We did it at Sound Emporium, in the B room at Sound Emporium.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fun. Molly Tuttle's band was down the hall in the A room recording their most recent record. And Jerry Douglas was producing, and he would kind of pop into our control room and swap Mike Aldridge stories with Rob when we were on breaks. And I had never met him before, so I was just like, whoa.
Do you change up your guitar of choice for like the big Nashville session, or what did you play?
I brought my bourgeois slope D from the early 90s that I've had for a few years. And that was pretty much all of it. Yeah. I just stuck with that one guitar. But I don't know. I probably could have called in a few favors. But the music was definitely challenging enough. Like I had been like really working on the tunes with that guitar for months at that point. I took it on the bus with me on tour that whole summer and fall, and was just playing it for hours every day. So I felt like we had a bond at that point with that material.
I love that you're literally traveling the world in this like big band jazz setting, filling concert halls and arenas literally. And then like after hours, you're trying to hone in on this sort of like bluegrass sound.
It's pretty funny, what's kind of, I think is kind of an interesting anecdote that people might appreciate is that, musicians like music. I think amongst the like, the working musician world, these sort of lines between genres and idioms aren't as like sharply defined as somebody who's just listening might think. Like Michael's music director, this brilliant guy named Nick Jacobson Larson, and he is just as, like he knows this music. He has never really like he and I would sit around and play like the Overgrown Waltz like backstage before Bublé show. There's definitely an appreciation for that stuff among people in that world. One time, Michael didn't usually ride the bus with us, but one time he did. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing the story. One time he did, and it was like late after a show, and I was in the front lounge and I was listening to Tony Rice, the Native American record, and that song Shadows was on. And he came in and was like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Oh man, it's Tony Rice." And I was sort of telling him all about it, and he was really into it. And he goes, "Isn't this a Gordon Lightfoot song?" And I was like, "Yeah," but he knows that because he's Canadian.
Of course.
Yeah, it's the lines in terms of like appreciation for all these different kinds of music. It's all there, and certainly the Nashville people were, they were very much curious about, that whole other side of things, like the big pop touring kind of thing.
Sure. I mean, I guess it would actually be weirder if, after playing a bunch of Bublé and jazz standards, you went back to the bus and played Johnny Smith or something. Like that it'd be even weirder.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that show, I mean, you came to that show, right? In
Oh,
Seattle, like,
I did come to that show, and I remember talking to you before you took that gig, and I can't remember where we were, but you were like, "I'm thinking about doing this," and yeah, I mean, it's an incredible show.
yeah, it's interesting because um the I really think of it as like you have to like really know your jazz and like be a competent jazz musician to cut it in that band. But a lot of the material is really more on the pop side of things. So the guitar chair, I approach it, like I get to be this um kind of chameleonic studio musician guy, except on stage, which is something I love. And being in LA, I have a real rich appreciation for that whole tradition and history as well. So like, I'm playing, and because his Michael's records are all, David Foster and Bob Rock, all these kind of legendary producers. There's a real amazing lineage of like legendary session dudes who are playing on all his records. So, over the course of that show, I get to pretend, that I'm, John Pizzarelli and Dean Parks and Michael Landau and, Graham Dector, all these awesome, awesome musicians.
Yeah.
Um, and also try and find a way to bring my own, self to it as much as I can.
Yeah. What do you think that time on the road? And I forget, was it a full year or longer?
It was on and off from like August of 2022 until like October of last year. So like it wasn't nonstop through that whole time, but it was a little over a year.
I'm sure you will have stories for a life of, backstage stuff, unique venues you played. I mean, that's such a rarefied world, but what did that experience do for you as a player in general? Like, can you look back and go like, oh, I'm different now because of that?
Man, I don't know. I'm sure it did something. I I had never really like done like real serious touring before that. Like most people who play a show that big, they kind of work their way up to it, And I was sort of like just like kind of plopped into this real big intense situation. Um the power of doing something over and over and over again and trying to be as consistent as possible when you do it is such an art and such a craft. And I really enjoyed that. I definitely learned not to take he wants everybody in the band to just have a ball and not take themselves too seriously and just like, enjoy it. He kind of brings that energy to it. So to do that and also make sure you're, doing a good job. I think I learned, something there maybe. There's also a lot about like focusing. When you're playing in front of 10,000 people, you can't be in your head or else you'll just freak out, So, playing that show 100 odd times, every time I got to do it was sort of like, I would play different games to try and get myself out of being inside my own head. Because, with in-ear monitors, when you're, really hearing everything very closely, and you're in any way like self-critical,
Yeah.
it can be kind of intense. So whatever I could do to try and focus outwards towards, the other guys in the band or Bublé or the audience. Getting to do that again and again was great practice for that. And I also like learned how to be on the road. That's a skill, independent of just playing the guitar.
What were some hard learned lessons there of life on the road?
Don't stay up all night drinking with when you've got a 7 a.m. lobby call the next morning.
Sure.
And a 15-hour flight. I don't know. Like I don't think I ever committed any like cardinal sins that were like hard lessons to learn or anything.
Good.
But if you don't make bus call, the bus is going to leave without you.
Did that ever happen?
Like not to me.
No, but to others, maybe.
No, because everybody. If you're doing something like that, you've already like if you've already been drafted, you know what the deal is.
Mm-hmm.
Like anybody who's like too green or is not self-aware enough or perceptive to sort of pick up on these little things. It's this big moving caravan, and the best thing you can do is show up on time. Mm-hmm. Be great at what you're there to do, and be easy to hang out with.
Yeah.
But learning how to sleep on a bus was pretty hard.
Yeah, I bet. You mentioned 100 shows. I don't know how accurate that number is. But like, how much did those shows vary from night to night?
The set list was pretty much the same. It's a pretty big production with lights and video and pyro. Probably the only show in the world where pyro and like a big D'Angelico hollow body guitar coexist.
Well, I was going to ask, what guitar did you actually use for all those Bublé gigs? Or guitars? I think you had a backup.
I had 3 guitars. I had a D'Angelico archtop for all the kind of big band stuff. I had a Nash 60s style Telly. And then I had this Collings I-35.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably used the Telly and the 35 most of the set, and then the D'Angelico for like the last 25% of it.
None of those guitars came with the gig, right? Like, did anybody say you got to play a big box jazz guitar or anything like that?
They actually, they did have the D'Angelico.
Okay.
But no, nobody was really telling me like you have to play this guitar. But like depending on what the music was, it felt kind of obvious. Mm-hmm. And the other thing about like being in a situation like that is like if you've been hired to be there, like you're responsible for your department, and everybody is generally trusting that you're going to make the right calls. And for you to be asking everybody, like, do you think this is right? Like, is this working? Is this not working? Like, if it's not working, they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
So any sort of internal dialogue you have about that, it stays that way. And I was always trying to, think about, man, what could I be doing to, make this better and elevate this a little more?
Yeah.
And, if that was noticed, cool. Like if it wasn't, also cool. If anything, it was, for my own, edification.
And you mentioned the in-ear monitors. So you obviously were just playing direct into something.
Yeah, yeah, they're just a Kemper stage.
Yeah.
And I went way in on learning how to program that. I think I talked about that a little bit on one of the string theories pods we did, but that was a learning curve for me. You know, I'm used to playing with amps and a pedal board. And the thing about playing pop music on big stages is that you got to have that skill set together in order to do it. So now that I know how to do that, I hope it's not the last time I get to do it, because I put a lot of hours into learning how to do it.
Well, I was going to ask, we're talking about this in the past tense. Is this gig over, or could it continue again, or you have no idea?
I kind of have no idea. If, anytime he asks me to play, I'll be there. I think he wants to take a break for a couple of years, to, spend time with his kids and do other stuff, and I think there are like a couple one-off gigs, scattered here and there. But we'll see. I would do it again.
Are you going to be able to play shows with the Passages lineup?
Oh man, I wish. I think I would go bankrupt. I haven't really pursued it, to be honest with you. Just because this year has ended up being a little bit, like I'm trying to enjoy the time that I have at home after like not really being home at all for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I love playing like other people's music and getting to be a sideman. It's such a privilege that anybody would ever trust me with their music. So I'm sort of trying to continue to say yes to those opportunities whenever they come up. So in terms of, scheduling, that's where I'm kind of trying to focus things.
Anything you can talk about?
Oh yeah, I've been playing with the Waylon Jennys since last October. Like basically, I think like less than 2 weeks after the last Bublé gig finished, I was with them.
That's awesome,
and that's been really, really fun, really, really fun, and a total 180 from the other thing musically, but equally as fun in different ways.
Totally. And then at some point in your copious amounts of spare time, you released this amazing book, String Theories, which we dedicated 4 whole podcasts to. When did you guys even have time to do that?
That actually really started before COVID, and most of it was done really during lockdown times.
Okay.
And then it took a long while to actually, figure out how we were going to put it out, and kind of figure out how to do that in the way that made the most sense, and to figure out how to get it to reach people and get it, edited and designed. And, you make a magazine, that stuff takes time.
Yes. All the non-sexy stuff. It's all
exactly
takes weeks and months. Yes.
Exactly. And, by the time we were in that zone of it, like I was playing with Bublé, Adam was out with Liz Wright a lot. We were both very busy, so we would, have these snatches of time, where we could kind of move it down the road a little bit more. But most of the work was done in 2020 and 2021, I think. But it really started with Adam. He is one of the most generous dudes on the planet. And we were talking one day, this is, I guess, 2019, so he was still living in LA. And we were talking one day, and he said, I just realized that I'm the same age that Mick Goodrick was when he published The Advancing Guitarist, which is, this Bible
Yeah.
of um, small picture and big picture thinking, kind of mostly geared towards jazz players. But that was huge, very important book for me, very important book for Adam. I think many generations of improvising guitar players feel that way about it. It's it's this canonical text, right?
Yeah.
And so he said that, and I was like, man, like I think it's kind of time that you wrote your own version of that. Like you're advancing guitarist. Adam's a brilliant teacher and communicator, and he's done a lot of teaching over the years, both privately, and courses and books through different publishers. So that world of things is not new for him, and I basically spent my entire 20s teaching guitar lessons.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of thoughts and opinions and stuff about that sort of thing. But I just said that to him offhand, like, hey, like maybe it's your time to write a book like that. And he's the one who said to me, "I put it together." And I was like, oh my God, sure. And I just tried to follow up and follow through and make sure that he wasn't just being nice.
Yeah. Well, you did it.
Yeah, I'm really, really proud of it. It seems like it's really resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which, absolutely, blows my mind. But, a lot of that stuff is, my contributions to that book are, I sort of helped kind of organize it. A lot of the content started with Adam's YouTube videos, and I would transcribe that and get it or organize it into something that read well on the page. And he really encouraged me to also generate some stuff and bring my perspective to it, which he totally didn't have to do. I think I said on one of those podcast takeovers we did that Adam's had a career since I was in diapers. He knows what he's talking about and has, many more years of experience to back it up than I do. So the fact that he thought I had anything worth contributing in terms of material, was a very really, really gratifying. And when somebody like that kind of entrusts you to come up with something and encourages you to, you kind of have to make sure you deliver.
Yeah. I mean, you did though. And now that the book is out, I'm sure it's sort of like when we put out the magazine, like the book's been out for a few months now or more, but like people are just finally getting wind of it and getting like latching onto it and telling you what they think of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to put out another book?
I feel like I need to like have some more experiences first. I think I need to tour and make records for another 10 or 15 years before I have something new to say.
Yeah. You guys,
I feel like I'm.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I feel like I'm still very green in so many ways.
You guys took over the podcast and you talked about some of your own personal music resolutions for the year. How are those going?
They're going okay. Now that I'm back on the road, you're catching me right in between two weekends with the Jennies. Now that I'm back on the road, it's a little bit tricky to kind of stay the course. But But in general, it's been pretty good. I think I spent, way more time in my recording software than I would have if I hadn't made that resolution. It's going. You always want to try and look back at what you said at the beginning and ask yourself, am I still doing this? And if not, like, don't let it kill you.
Totally.
Yeah. That is the nut I do want to try and crack one day. Just like how to keep on that stuff when you're traveling and working and doing stuff for other people.
Yeah. It's hard
because it's so hard. I mean, it's easy. I think it's easier to keep that stuff when you're home and you have a somewhat consistent day-to-day schedule. But when you're on the road, you kind of have to just give yourself over to the road.
Totally. Well, Ethan, the record is incredible. I've been listening to it since you sent me the link. It's out. It'll be out Jason. When this comes out. It'll be out, and everyone should go check it out. It's so cool. And the banjo thing, like, I'm gonna now think about that whenever I listen to it again, because it is like the Bela Fleck Drive record or any number of those records. And now I'm just and next time I interview a banjo player, I'm gonna have to ask them what their thought process is.
I'm very curious to know if there's something to that.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. It would be very interesting to find out.
I'll keep you posted.
Thanks.
All right, that was my chat with Ethan Sherman. I hope you liked it. Hit me up at podcast@fretboardjournal.com if you ever have any questions or suggestions for this podcast, and leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. It goes such a long way towards helping us grow and helping others find this show. Till next time.